With all that's happening in society and with the riots and with the looting and what's happening on the ground, I can't think of a better person to have with us as Michael Cutler. Mike has 30 years of experience with the former Immigration and Naturalization Service, positions included, and there were many. Let me just give you a brief overview. Mike was the immigration inspector assigned to Kennedy International Airport in New York. He was an examiner to the unit which was responsible for adjudicating petitions filed by United States citizens and lawfully admitted permanent resident aliens on behalf of their alien spouses. Michael was a criminal investigator, a special agent for the INS in New York City. Michael was the INS representative to the Unified Intelligence Division of the DEA in New York, and he was a senior special agent assigned to organized crime and drug enforcement task force. Bottom line, folks, Mike's career was unusual in that it provided him with a sort of, if you will, a grand tour that gave him the extensive insight into many aspects of immigration, and also provided him with an intimate view on how immigration impacted other law enforcement agencies within the United States. You know, Michael is someone you need to follow on a daily basis, and there are many ways to do that. One easy way to do that is go to his website, Michael Cutler, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net. Mike, welcome back to Operation Freedom.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for having me. Boy, there's a Chinese curse that says live in interesting times, and boy, are these times lots more interesting than we wish they were. You know, as an immigration agent, I work very closely with other law enforcement agencies, including the New York City Police Department, and I don't know if you saw the horrific scenes outside of Prospect Park. I used to have a desk at the police precinct just a couple of blocks from where some of that rioting was taking place. I worked on a day-to-day basis with members of the NYPD, and I could tell you I was horrified over the video of the death of George Floyd. It sickened me. It gave me a problem sleeping. I was involved with thousands of arrests, directly and indirectly, as an immigration agent. I've arrested drug dealers, terrorists, murderers, and people simply working illegally in the United States. It ran the gamut. I never received a single complaint about excessive force or doing anything improperly, nor did most of my colleagues. And if there was a situation on the street where some person you're trying to arrest throws a punch at an agent and there's a fight, you immediately have the instinct to jump in and separate them. Look, people with badges are human. Sometimes emotions run high. All kinds of stuff happens. And law enforcement is a very tough profession. USA Today but in January reported that last year a record number of police officers committed suicide. 228 police officers were known to have committed suicide. More people in law enforcement died at their own hand than were killed in the line of duty by an assailant. Think about that. We expect an awful lot of law enforcement, and we have the right to demand it. And when people do badly in various professions, and you were a doctor, and I'm sure you met doctors who never should have been given that title doctor. There are many school teachers who shouldn't be school teachers. There are many airline pilots, perhaps, who shouldn't be in the cockpit. But when a police officer is the round peg in the square hole, some really bad things can happen. So the first thing that struck me was how in the world could this guy have 17 complaints against him, the cop that's accused of killing George Floyd, and still have him out on the street with handcuffs, a badge, and gun. You know, the NYPD had some cops who, for whatever reason, over time, maybe they burned out, maybe they were having an emotional crisis, could no longer demonstrate the kind of restraint and cool-headed thinking that you need in law enforcement. And you do. You're putting your life on the line. You walk into combat. You go from 0 to 60. You're in the car, nothing is happening. Suddenly there's a crime in front of you, or the call goes on over the air. And I used to work with the cops. I would ride with them very often. Shots fired. And now you're going 80 miles an hour through city streets, racing into a gun battle. You know, somebody once described law enforcement officers as those people who run toward that which any rational person would run from. But sometimes police officers become overwhelmed. They burn out. People go into the military, they do a 5-year hitch and they leave, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But what the NYPD would do is if they didn't want to cost the guy his job and his ability to support his family, they put him what they used to jokingly call the rubber gun squad. They took away the guy's shield. They took away his firearm, his handcuffs, and they found work for him in the precinct that did not put him in the position where he or she would have to make any arrests or could make any arrests. The idea was this is somebody who just can't deal with being out on the street. We don't want to leave him destitute. Where's he going to get a job after being fired from the police department? So they find a if you will, combatant role for them. So they earn their paycheck, they get their pension, and they move on. This needs to be looked at carefully. Anytime there's an allegation of excessive force, the powers that be need to take a hard look and say, wait a minute, is there a pattern? For somebody to have had 17 complaints, this is as much on that police department and its administrators as it is on him. And, you know, I read an interesting magazine article a number of years ago. It was an FBI magazine that they published. And one of the members, I think he was a member of the FBI with a degree in psychology, who said maybe the solution to bad police is to give people the option of retiring after 5 years. What most people don't realize, they say, oh, those civil servants, you can't fire them. Well, you know, once you're invested in that pension system, the system has you by the short hair because you don't want to lose your pension after putting all that time in. So maybe the solution is to say to people, if you've done 5 years and you're really finding that you can't deal with the stress, think of those suicides, think of all the other issues, the alcoholism, perhaps family problems, we'll give you a way reduced pension, but you can leave now. So you walk out the door with your dignity. You walk out the door with, I don't know, a 20% pension, whatever, you work it out. And you can move on and become a school teacher. You could become a car salesman. You could become a librarian. I don't care what you do. We'll give you a portion of the pension, prorated based on how many years of service, and you're welcome to leave. So maybe people that should no longer be out there enforcing the laws will now have the option of gracefully walking out the door with some money and the opportunity to start their life over in a new field of endeavor. But what we've seen in the streets, the rioting, this is not about protest. And I'm all about the First Amendment. Look, I've been all over the country giving speeches, testifying before Congress, being on terrific programs like yours. Freedom of speech is an integral part of our society, which is being shut down, by the way, by the extremists, particularly on the left, Antifa and so forth. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to have respect for each other. But the rioting isn't about protesting inequalities and violence by the police department. It was violence being perpetrated against innocent people by thugs. And what I find remarkable, you know, immigration agents focus on borders, border security, the Border Patrol, considering that international ports of entry are really extensions of the U.S. border. The concern about people coming from outside of Minnesota to perpetrate violent crime. And suddenly everyone's saying they don't belong here, they shouldn't be coming here to do that. And when I heard that, I said, wow, this sounds awfully familiar. Because as an immigration agent, I've been saying, look, we're a welcoming nation, we're a nation of immigrants, I'm first-generation American. But why in the world would anybody in a position of authority from either political party not want to make certain that you don't let people who shouldn't be in your country, just like people shouldn't be coming into a different state to commit crime, coming into our country to commit crime? We clearly are dealing with domestic terrorism. And by the way, we must not rule out the possibility that these highly organized, highly effective, and apparently trained, because they were using military tactics and outflanking the police. If you watch what's been happening in all these states, don't tell me this is spontaneous across the country. This doesn't happen spontaneously. These people are acting like sleeper agents. There was an incident that could be exploited. They got a call to action, and within hours they were up and mobilized. Think about the careful coordination all of this has taken. There may well be foreign countries involved, and I just saw something on the news. That's what I've been thinking about the last couple of days. The administration is now looking at the potential that Russia and China, and I would add to that mix Iran, may well be fomenting what you're seeing in terms of the violence, the looting, and the fires that are being set. And China, by the way, yesterday said that what was happening in America was beautiful. What was happening in America was beautiful. They're enjoying it. And we've been educating Chinese engineers and scientists in our universities, and the universities have been accepting, at least so far it's been identified, $6 billion in funding. And I've written about it for frontpagemag.com, Front Page Magazine. I hope after the program everyone will check out my articles. And please forward the links. I call it my bucket brigade of truth. Well, why are universities accepting $6 billion from the likes of Saudi Arabia, from possibly Russia, Iran, China, United Arab Emirates? Why? What are they getting for that money? Well, I'll tell you what they're getting. They're getting their students into our universities. They're also impacting the curriculum being taught and the decisions being made as to who the faculty members are. So we're turning our universities into propaganda centers for our enemies. That's what we've done. And if you look at what's happened on college campuses, shutting down rational, reasonable debate, where American children going to American colleges are afraid to speak their minds. You know, Alan Dershowitz is one of my heroes. Now, I don't always agree with Alan, but I did hear him deliver an amazing speech at a memorial service for the Holocaust. I'm Jewish, and my family suffered greatly because of bigotry. I've experienced anti-Semitism, and it's horrific. People need to look at people as human beings and forget about race, religion, ethnicity, what I call the superficial issues. But tragically, people aren't always rational or decent. And Dershowitz made a point that everyone's physical safety must be protected on campuses, but no one's ideas should go without challenge on college campuses. So we've had totalitarianism imposed on our campuses. You have to wonder how much of that totalitarianism is the result of outside influence from foreign countries. And then you have the news media stirring the racial pot. And I don't care what network you want to talk about. You hear this nonsense about the pollsters. Oh, we're having an election. Black voters and Jewish voters and Latino voters. And wait a minute. You want to talk about demographics, Dave, it makes sense to talk about the guy that got out of college versus the guy that's the high school dropout, the person who lives on a farm versus the person who lives in a city, someone who's retired versus someone who's working, someone with children versus someone without kids. Those are all rational demographics, and it makes sense. If you live in the city, you worry about mass transit. You don't worry about soybean prices. If you live on a farm, it's the opposite. But this division and then the nonsense about, white supremacists and white privilege and all this other nonsense, we're all trying to make our way in this difficult life that we live. And look at the damage being done by the pollsters and the politicians and everyone else who exploits our differences rather than drawing us together. Let's not forget America's slogan of e pluribus unum, out of many one. How many people are exploiting race? And look at the poverty of Americans, especially American minority kids who live in abject poverty with no hope of elevating themselves out of poverty unless they become involved in criminal enterprise, because universities are not a possibility for them. We have American kids getting degrees. They're running up college bills, student loans that look like mortgage payments. And then corporate America hires foreign programmers, foreign engineers, so that they could drive down wages and maximize their profitability. And what has happened to the middle class of America? It's going bye-bye. And with that comes dissension. With that comes frustration. With that comes anger. And with all that anger comes the opportunity to exploit that anger and frustration. Am I getting anything wrong here, Dave?
No, I don't think you are. And I think you're way ahead of the game. And so earlier today, Mike, President Trump announced that he's going to label Antifa a terrorist organization. What are going to be can you outline what that would mean as far as the ramifications of the U.S. government taking on these thugs that, as you say, are carrying out paramilitary operations as though they've been trained and they've been well-funded and well-trained. The significance of him labeling Antifa a terrorist organization.
Well, I think it will give him the opportunity to seize assets if you can find people who are from the outside doing this or members of the group. It will give them access to intelligence. We need to be able to figure out how they're communicating and perhaps use signal intelligence from the NSA and other agencies to go after it. He was not overreacting when he said that we ought to bring the military in if need be. People are losing their lives, and dead is dead, okay? And this is a threat to our national security. It's a threat to every American. And if the government can't safeguard the lives of its citizens, then nothing that government does is worthwhile. It was magnificent to see the launch of the SpaceX rocket yesterday. My original dream was to be an aerospace engineer. But what good is all of that if people in America can't live a decent, secure life? That's the first responsibility, just as it is for a parent. The first responsibility parents have is to provide a wholesome, safe environment for their children. And I don't know if it's only Antifa. It could be the radical right. It could be the radical left. We become too radicalized. And why are we radicalized? We're pitting American against American, and we're scapegoating each other. This was the tactics that led to the Holocaust. You know, I thought about Kristallnacht, where all the windows were broken of the Jewish shopkeepers, and the Nazis went out there and said to the poor that couldn't get a job, the reason you can't get a job is because of the Jews. Now you have minorities being told that the reason they can't get jobs is either because of white bigotry or whatever, turning this into a racial issue. Look, America is at its best when all Americans do well. When politicians say America must lead and the way to get America to lead is to bring in the world's best and brightest, they're missing the point to the exercise. America isn't a place on a map. America isn't the highways and the parks and the lakes and the rivers and the shopping malls. America is its people. And if the American people aren't benefiting, then America isn't leading, because America is made up of Americans of every race, every religion, and we are the most ethnically diverse country on the planet. This isn't about white or black or purple. This is about Americans being treated like trash. They're being told that the American dream applies to people who shouldn't be here. And, you know, if you dare use the word alien, you're accused of hate speech. And look at what's going on with the Internet, with Facebook, with Twitter. It's remarkable. The word alien isn't an insult. It simply means any person not a citizen or national of the United States. And it makes a clear distinction between lawful immigrants, and we admit 1 million a year, and those people who violate our laws. People that are looting aren't people making cashless purchases, okay? Let's get the language straight. If you can't use accurate language, you can't have an honest conversation, and the crooks in politics don't want that honest conversation. They want to keep Americans down. They want to promise them that which they know they can't deliver. Look at Joe Biden. He wants open borders and lawful status for all the illegal aliens in the country. If we did this, America is done. No one in the so-called journalism field will dare ask him, hey, Joe, how do you do the math? If, let's say, we have 30 million illegal aliens, even our most liberal universities estimate the number at 25 million now, thereabouts. I would argue it's way higher. It's not just them, because they could then bring all their minor children in. So if you legalize 30 million and they each bring in 2 children on average, and it could be 3, 4, or 5, you're talking about tens of millions of school-age kids entering America within a year or two, flooding our schools, destroying any semblance of an education opportunity for all Americans who can't afford to go to private school. And at that point, where are we? We could wind up with 100 million new people competing with jobs or for jobs with Americans. And yet Joe Biden says, oh, I'm going to give you all the jobs. I'm going to help you. It's an empty promise, because what he proposes is to flood America with so much competition for Americans that the party is over. Wages will be destroyed. They're looking for a $15 an hour, not minimum wage, Dave. They want a $15 an hour standard wage. Destroy the middle class. And when I confronted the Republicans, they don't want to speak up about it, because they're in on it, because they've been bought and paid for by the banks, by the Chamber of Commerce, by the immigration lawyers. Our immigration system has become a delivery system that delivers an unlimited supply of cheap, exploitable labor, foreign tourists, foreign students, and for the lawyers, an unlimited supply of clients. And they never hire immigration agents, because the agents are likely to find the crooked lawyers and find these employers who are doing damage to innocent people by exploiting them. If you want to get rid of the gangs and the drugs and everything else, you need immigration law enforcement, and they want to end it. And by the way, I just have to make a point. You know, for years I've said to you that the best metric for border security is the price of heroin and cocaine. Now that the border has been tightened because of the coronavirus, guess what has happened to the price of heroin and cocaine? It's now in the stratosphere. Border security works. The problem is neither party really wants border security, and this is leading to poverty. It's leading to frustration. And it's leading to violence, especially at the hands of police officers who shouldn't be police officers. We have to look at how we recruit police officers and maybe how we pay them. Look, as a doctor, you know that emergency room doctors used to be where you went if you were an intern, right? It was the first place you went, and that's where you need the most capable people, because they have to make split-second life and death decisions. It became a specialty all by itself. Maybe we should be paying more to people that become police officers. Make certain that they have advanced education. You don't want some guy off the street who's just looking for excitement. And maybe that would help. But we certainly have to police the police, and we need politicians who show integrity because, there's a wonderful Yiddish expression that says that when the fish goes bad, it smells from the head. You look at the corruption of the political system, and then you ask yourself, if these are the guys that are setting the standards for society, how in the world do you expect anything better than what we're seeing today?
Very true, Mike. It's very true. So, Mike, educate our listeners. You are one of the people that they need to be in touch with on a daily basis, every day, because you put out a tremendous amount of information, very high quality, very in-depth information the bought-off lamestream fake media will not touch or even go near. How can folks follow you? How can they get more information about your efforts and your writings?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm proud that for many years I've been writing for David Horowitz Freedom Center. It's Front Page Magazine. In fact, my latest article I think would be of interest to folks. It's for Democrats to succeed, Americans must fail. Inside the left's morbid agenda to destroy the American middle class. That's over at frontpagemag.com.